And we're back with side two of the Smiths' third album, The Queen is Dead. And I'll try to proceed chronologically this time. And I'll try to remember that the adjective describing people from Manchester is Mancunian. Let's see how I do, people. All right, so side two opens with what may be my favorite Smiths track of all time, Big Mouth Strikes Again. I think, one can make an argument that it's their finest track. I know that Johnny Marr's intention was to write his own version of Jumpin' Jack Flash, the Stones' great classic, and to some extent I think he succeeded. I mean, right out of the gate, it's just, as you said with, some of the other tracks on side one, it's like no nonsense, no fucking about. They just go right into it, It's like there's that guitar intro, and then the drums and bass come in, and Morrissey starts singing those brilliant lines addressed to Sweetness.
Was he only joking? And I guess the question I have in my mind, Mark, is who is Big Mouth? Who can he be referring to? Himself? Margaret Thatcher? The rhythm section? I mean, the record producers?
Well,
the record label?
I always thought it was self-deprecation. I thought he's talking about himself, right? Like he's addressing his lover or friend or significant other, Sweetness. I was only joking when I said I'd like to smash every tooth in your head. So he's apologizing to this friend or lover for his harsh words. And so I always took it that way. Like, he's Big Mouth. He's like, I'm Big Mouth. La di da di da,
Which is quite accurate, right? I mean, we're not really telling the people anything that they probably don't already know, that Morrissey is a bit of a big mouth.
Certainly people seem
to this very day.
Well, certainly people seem to take a lot of things he said recently. They've taken umbrage with a lot of things he's said recently, but I think he's always had this self-deprecation that's, this, I don't know, this aspect of not taking himself too seriously, and I think it's, quite an endearing quality, and a good one for a songwriter and a public figure to have, The
guitar sounds great in this song as well. I mean, as they do it, I think, throughout the album, the guitar work in this song is just fantastic.
Absolutely.
And as you and I were sharing some thoughts and comments back and forth on WhatsApp, I don't really think there was anyone doing what Johnny Marr was at that time. Stuart McGeoch is about the closest that I can think of, who played with Susie. And Banshees and Pill and bands like that. That type of style, or that busyness, but without being like a guitar, as we mentioned earlier about Van Halen or Bon Jovi, without being that guitar hero-ish, but his style is it's a landmark, I think, in British pop music. I would say.
How would we describe it? It is kind of, you can hear the influence of the guy from Susie and the Banshees. I never say his name because I don't know how to pronounce it. You say McGeoch?
McGeoch.
Yeah, McGeoch. Is he a Scot too?
Is
he Scottish?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think he's mentioned as like an influence on all of these guys, including Marr. And I just realized, this classic album, there's not a single guitar solo, is there? Like, all of the great guitar work, there's no solo. Yeah. So that's another punk kind of aspect to it, right? Like, there's no grandstanding, even though some of the jams go on longer than maybe they should have, but there's no like flashy kind of, and we see this in like other post-punk bands like Killing Joke, right? Like the solo was kind of frowned upon, right? Because it's like we're a group, we just do this together. There's no need for one person to like showcase himself by playing a solo. For example,
I think as we talk about influences there, and the influence that Stuart McGeoch had on so many guitar players of that time, and even up to the present time, but Johnny Marr's influence on guitar players is really noticeable in Noel Gallagher, for example, another fellow Mancunian, but maybe from a less is more guitarist point of view. I mean that in a good way. He's not a guitar wizard. He constructs his music around the basics of a guitar,
yes,
and then builds on it. And you hear a lot of his solo work. Oasis a different kettle of fish, I think. Definitely solo work. You can hear the layered approach to his guitar playing,
yes,
the subtleties of it.
I've heard him talk in interviews about the influence of both Marr and Morrissey. He rates the Smiths very highly, and the songwriting duo he thinks was basically, he thinks they are as important as Lennon and McCartney, or so it seems, and the way he talks about them. Well, the Walkman, the aforementioned Walkman, appears in this song too. Apparently Joan of Arc had a Walkman, which is that's just such an unusual image, and
slightly surreal.
Yeah, it's surreal and absurd as well. Like, where do you get that in pop music of the day, or even today? Some of the surreal lyrics of Dylan during the 60s, you would get that strange Dada-esque imagery or surrealist imagery.
To go with that music that we just described, I mean, it's quite a compare and contrast.
Yeah, but it's a nice mix. I notice Morrissey's use of internal rhyme, right? Like, I've got no right to take my place with the human race. It's like he rhymes within the line, not just at the end of each line. He does that quite a bit. And in his autobiography, he talks about how he was influenced by like certain British English poets, I should say, of I don't know, like the Restoration period, many of whom had like very short lines, which he felt were like related in some way to the pop lyrics he was composing. So he in the autobiography, he talks about how he always wanted to be a poet, a lyricist in the manner of Wilde and some of these earlier British English poets that he admired, but with a beat. And often it was these short lines, so we see him making use of internal rhyme quite a bit. And I suppose you could say the self-deprecatory theme continues with track 7, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side. I certainly take that as being autobiographical, and he has a sense of humor about himself. He doesn't take himself too seriously. True, yes, I am depressed, I am suicidal, but I can have a laugh about it. And I can be ironic about it.
Sorry to interrupt you. My thoughts and feelings have really changed about this song, because my first memories of this song would be from, when did this album come out? 1986. In the summer of 1986, and I can remember the first. We didn't have MTV or whatever it was, it just wasn't a thing. but it was on Saturday morning kids TV, whatever program it was. It was like new video from the Smiths, and these were just words that we'd never heard before. Video and Smiths in the same thing, right? It was like they made a video for a song.
Right.
It's like, oh, so I remember coming downstairs to watch it, and I was just like, just being so disappointed because I was just like, this is like the ultimate sellout, the Smiths making a video. And I mean, that might just sound a bit absurd today, but look, hindsight's a wonderful thing, of course, but looking back now in my more jaded older, with my older hat on, I can definitely see this as a classic pop song. If the Smiths ever did pop, then this is it. You know, it has all the elements that you need to make a great pop tune. The bass particularly.
Oh, I didn't focus so much on the bass. I'll have to go back and listen more closely. I think I was more. It
just sounds like he's doing his own thing. I mean, it's the bass playing in the Smiths is just so brilliantly understated. It's almost like he's in another room doing his own thing. And then they're just like, all right, let's just add him here. I mean, it just fits wonderfully. But it's so unique and so dynamic and so, as you were saying earlier, it has that attack flavour to it.
Yeah.
I read a thing recently, so we should say Andy Rourke recently passed away not too long ago. And some of the interviews that I saw at that time, they were talking about, it might have been Mike Joyce actually, was saying that Andy Rourke his style could have been a bit like funk, but he couldn't really say that to Morrissey because I don't think that's what Morrissey was really into at the time, you know, that style. His approach to bass playing was quite funky.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking of the funky bass line on, what is it? Unruly boys that will not settle down. They must be taken in hand. What's that? Barbarism begins at home, is it? Barbarism. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty funky, isn't it?
The bass playing in that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think he said they had to draw the line at slapping the bass, right? So maybe he was allowed up to a point, and then they were like, if it was a thumb in sight, then, you know, Morrissey would probably get his big stick out and kind of, or his bush or whatever it was, and kind of tell him off and make him go sit in the corner like a Victorian schoolboy or something from a Dickensian novel, you know. But the song itself, absolutely brilliant. As I said, my first memories of it were that of, it's like, oh man, this is the beginning of the end. That's really what it felt like. From an artistic band point of view, I can't even remember the video. I mean, it's one of those in a studio, nothing happens videos, cheap and cheerful. Yeah. Ironically, not cheerful. But, you know, but the song itself, listen back now, it sounds great.
Well, what can we say about track 8, Vicar in a Tutu? Another short one. Kind of, to me, there's like a rockabilly shuffle vibe.
We haven't been swapping notes, right? So
is that what you said too? Rockabilly?
I just have 3 words: guitar, work, a little arrow, and then country.
Yeah, it does have a country flavor
twang to it. Yeah,
there's a twang. Yeah. Which is
rockabilly, anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's somewhat unexpected, but I mean, it shouldn't be given the eclectic influences that, you know, Marr absorbed.
I'm sure it had a lot of 16-year-old boys in many working class neighbourhoods and areas and estates and schemes and all of these places where we grew up were rushing to their dictionary to find out what is a tutu. You know,
or vicar, for that matter. What is a vicar? Maybe in the UK, that's
this for us. A vicar is more the Church of England. In Scotland, they're called ministers,
right? If
they're from the Protestant church.
Yeah. Well, that as soon as I said that, I thought, yeah, actually, in the UK, that would be a more familiar term. But in the States, that's like unheard of. That's not used.
What is it?
Yeah, exactly. You could figure it out from the rest of the lyrics. Yeah. But yeah, it's I mean, it's
this.
Well, I was just going to say that's one of the charms of a lyricist like Morrissey, it you learn something, right? You learn something from listening to the song. You learn a new word, or you learn about some new concept.
We go back to that punk ethic as well. It just kind of starts. I was minding my business, and then here we go.
Yeah. It's another.
And you don't really know where the song's going. You're just like, all right, what's this?
It starts and ends in under 3 minutes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, number nine. There is a light that never goes out. This is according to the Spotify stats, this is the most popular track on the album, and for good reason. It's also a great one, and I don't know if you want to talk about like the musical aspects, but for me, the contrast between life and death is what is so prominent here, and I don't know, maybe that's what makes it such a powerful song. I want to see life, but then a few lines later, to die by your side, the pleasure would be all mine. And the imagery of the double-decker bus and the 10-ton truck.
10-ton truck, yes.
Classic Morrissey. Like, I don't see how anyone could like be upset, and outraged by him. Like, he's obviously having a laugh, He's discussing very serious themes and emotions.
There's like a
and
Romeo
feelings.
and Juliet element to this song, I think.
But ironically, it's like he sees the humor in it, and there's again that self-deprecation. It's like a mature teenager or young adult is reflecting on the angst of that
the feeling
period of his life, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like, he's looking back now that he's 20 years, 7 months, and 27 days old, and by this time he's probably older than that, but that's a weirdly specific, dating of himself. But there's a maturity and wisdom to it, which I think is, you can't easily dismiss this as childish
or just
adolescent.
folly.
Adolescent, yeah, it's deep,
Absolutely.
What's the light? What's the light that never goes out? Since we asked, who the big mouth was. Well, what is the light that never goes out? I mean, we don't even really hear it until the end. And again, it's that refrain. We have 3 or 4 tracks that end with like a
very
chant.
Similar. Yeah, exactly.
So what is the light that never goes out? Despite all this obsession with death and being run over by trucks and so forth, and buses.
I don't know, is it like the spirit of the working class?
Yeah, it could be something like that. I mean, I was also thinking of like the light. In the first verse, I think he mentions, I want to go out where there are people and there's music and everything. So is it like the light of the nightlife? I mean, of course we don't want to reflect on it too carefully because it loses some of its mystery. Sort of like in the previous song, there's that curious line, "I'm a living sign." What does that mean? That just came out of nowhere. So there are these catchphrases that are almost random. They don't. It's almost like he used the cut up style of composition, right? Like he had several poems. Oh, that's a nice. I've got this story about a kind of Romeo Juliet tragedy, but then I've got this line from another page in my journal that says, "There is a light that never goes out." What does it mean? I don't know, but it sounds good in here. I can imagine him composing that way. as these songs were being put together.
I'm just going to make a quick note here for the end of the pod.
So we should
As I was going to say, I just have one more thing to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
The song. We could. I think there are lots of things to talk about this song, but I don't know if the Smiths played a lot of festivals, Glastonbury, Leeds, or Reading, or they certainly didn't play Donington, right? Castle Donington, or anything like that. But I don't know what they played a lot of shows in up to a certain capacity or crowd capacity. But there is a light that never goes out. If the Smiths did stadium shows or arena shows, this is the song that everyone would know the chorus. This is their Wonderwall, right? This is that.
More so than Big Mouth, you think?
I think so, yeah. It just has a more... Big Mouth is a bit more spiky, a bit more punky feel to it. This just has a kind of classic chorus feel to it where everybody can sing, and if a 10-ton truck crashes into us.
Right.
You know, there's such an oblivious joy to singing lyrics that you don't really know what they're about. It's just lovely stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know if Johnny Marr plays this. I know he's played a lot of festivals recently or in the past few years, so maybe it's in his set, and maybe when he plays smaller shows, this might go down well with the crowd, because everybody knows it.
Is he, when he plays live now, is he doing the vocals?
He's the Morrissey, yeah.
Okay, interesting. I liked his solo album from a few years back. It was called The Messenger, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
I thought it was all right. I really like Morrissey's, 2014 solo album. World Peace is None of Your Business. That is a great record.
His first solo album was really good as well, the name of which completely escapes me.
Viva Hate, was it?
Viva Hate. I had Margaret on the Guillotine. I wonder who that's about, right? And Every Day's Like Sunday and all that stuff, if I remember rightly.
Well, the album closes out with a kind of throwaway, but I think it's a good song to close with. Some girls are bigger than others. Did you know that?
It's a talking point, if nothing else.
What an interesting observation. And some girls' mothers are bigger than other girls' mothers. That's a related fact. What can we say about this other than there's a very weird fade out and then fade back in at the beginning? Or is that just my...
No, I think there's a bit of experimentation going on sonically.
I don't know
what the production to it.
I don't know what the point of that was, but I guess it's an interesting gimmick, but I don't know what purpose it serves. Like the song starts and then it quickly fades out and then it fades back in and we keep going. So, okay, whatever. I don't know.
Might have just been a moment in time.
Which producer was responsible for that choice? Was it Morrissey or Marr, or did they agree together? Who knows? But again, despite the nonsensical lyrics, there are some interesting things. You know, we had a mention of Joan of Arc before, and then two other historical characters make an appearance here, Antony and Cleopatra, randomly. But that's and Antony is imagining exactly. Antony is imagining saying this to Cleopatra while guzzling ale.
I can maybe, to take a bit of a pun, I could maybe shine a bit of a light on where that came from or what it's about. Have you ever heard of the Carry On films?
No.
So you had Carry On Nurse, Carry On Doctor, Carry On Camping, Carry On Cleo. So basically these were movies started in the late 50s and they ran up until the late 70s, I think. Really bawdy, cheap seaside double entendre humour, like Benny Hill but with an ensemble cast.
Okay.
of that type of nature. So it would be all misses and stuff like that. And apparently, from what I remember, vaguely, this line of Tony and Cleo, or whatever it is it's described as, or in the Carry On film, I think it's like Tony and Cleo. But they do the historical parody of this set, and I think this is where this line comes from.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
Because he used a lot of those. He used the actress. He used the image of the actress who played Cleopatra in one of another album cover, I'm sure, somewhere.
Oh, and it's from one of these films.
Or maybe it was from her normal acting thing. She ended up in a soap opera called Coronation Street.
Oh, I know Coronation Street.
So she was like a big, I think she was like a starlet in the 60s and then disappeared. And then in the 80s, she came back in Coronation Street.
So it's not the Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor.
No, it's
Anthony
nothing quite so grand.
Cleopatra.
It's all a bit camp and cheap, and you can see the sets moving in the background, and it's all a bit rubbish. But that's kind of British life. I think it's actually a bit of a commentary on what British life's really like.
Right. Huh. Well, this too has a great line, completely unexpected, almost random. And you can barely hear it because there's some weird effect on the background vocals. I'm not even sure it's Morrissey singing it. It might be Marr or someone else. Send me the pillow, the one that you dream on. Did you catch that? I had to look it up.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what I was hearing, but beautiful.
I was looking at the lyrics as we were preparing for this.
Yeah,
and you
beautiful
just think,
lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely... I like that when you mentioned there about that kind of Frankenstein approach to it. You know, when you're taking bits and pieces from other things and yeah, this'll do.
Well, it's the David Bowie approach, you know, which he got from William S. Burroughs, which he got from the Surrealists. You know, cut up a newspaper and put all the pieces in a hat and draw them out randomly and see what you've got.
See where you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, just before we kind of wrap up on the song itself, I think this sonically is quite a radio-friendly song, lyrics aside, because obviously in the 1980s the BBC banned everything. Frankie Goes to Hollywood Relax, or you name it, they banned it. And I think, this song might get played on Radio 1, BBC Radio 1, after 10 o'clock at night, or probably not, because it implies that some girls are bigger than others, as you just alluded to, and so on. But musically, if you had it as an instrumental, I think it's a great radio-friendly piece of work. It's almost like a backing track.
Yeah, it's another...
Which makes me think, is it really necessary? I think you're right at the beginning. You were saying, is it a bit of a throwaway song? It's just kind of like, I've got some lyrics, I've got a tune. Yeah, we need another song, let's do it.
Well, you can definitely hear how it evolved out of a jam. It's like a sound check, and then Morrissey wandered onto the stage and said, by the way, did you know that some girls are bigger than others? And then they just developed it further, and there you go. You've got your closer on the greatest album ever made.
And it's a talking point. Indeed.
Well, one final thing about the girls that are bigger than others. Of course, this reminds me of the roughly contemporaneous Queen song, Fat Bottomed Girls, who, in case you didn't know, make the rockin' world go round. So, I guess
apparently is this
the
not been
bigger
taken
they are,
off playlists now?
Oh, Fat Bottomed Girls.
I saw something last week or the week before. I think so. I don't know if it's bollocks or not.
Wouldn't surprise me.
No.
And of course, the Stones have their own Some Girls song, don't they?
Indeed.
Quite different, and I'm sure that's been canceled in many quarters as well. It's an equal opportunity offender. Every type of girl is stereotyped by Sir Mick. And there's a couple of things I wanted
to add before we finished up, Mark, and it's just a kind of quick note if anybody wanted to actually go and hear Morrissey speak or be interviewed. There's two shows that come to mind. That's what I was writing down earlier. One is a panel show from the BBC with George Michael. It sounds bizarre. George Michael, Morrissey, and I forget who the other two panelists are.
I've seen
and
that.
The guy who's the host, yeah, it's like review music, and they're talking about
they talk about Joy Division.
New Order.
Yeah, Joy Division.
Yeah,
and
right. George Michael's like a big fan. Yeah, right. So go listen to that or go watch it, and you'll hear Morrissey give his forthright opinions about the music of the day. And the other one, I'm sure you'll find this on YouTube, is there was an arts program on ITV, so the commercial channel of the UK back in the 80s. It ran for years. It's called The South Bank Show. And they did an episode on the Smiths. So it's like a whole hour long or 50 minutes long thing about the Smiths. But it's from the highbrow perspective. The South Bank Show was like 10:30 on a Sunday night when all the kids were in bed, and then they talked about Falstaff or whatever for an hour, and everybody just went to bed instead. But
right.
they did an episode on the Smiths. Contemporary
culture. I can add
so
to that
I haven't
list.
seen it online. I haven't looked for it. Yeah, please go.
If you want a documentary on Morrissey himself, there's one called The Importance of Being Morrissey. I think that's what it's called. And of course that in itself is a Wildian allusion to the importance of being earnest. But it follows him around in LA, which is where he was based at the time, and for all I know, he still is.
I've seen it. Yeah,
yeah, it's good. I recently saw.
I just couldn't remember the title, but
that's the one. I think The Importance of Being Morrissey. I didn't know this, but a video recently popped up from a few years back. He was like pretty mercilessly parodied on The Simpsons, and he did not react well. It's like he considered taking legal action, which I was disappointed to hear. Like you want to sue someone for taking the piss out of you. That doesn't sound very
not the highest form of flattery?
Exactly. Like, I mean, you would think that as we've talked about his self-deprecation, like he would be amused by it rather than like irritated to the point that he wants to file a lawsuit. But maybe he's getting.
He seems to have a bee in his bonnet about something, Mark. I'm not really sure what it is or what's changed in him as a person. I mean, we all grow and we all mature, or we all maybe get older in this kind of respect. But he seems to be a bit of a misery guts, if I'm being honest. So I'm trying to think of a nice thing to say, but he does seem to have a bee in his bonnet about something or other, and it's not. Yeah, there's some undertones there that we could maybe talk about another time.
He's become a bit crotchety in his old age, as some people do.
Yeah, I think I'm being generous when I say that.
Well, I like to remember him for his statements in 2014. I think world peace is none of your business is still relevant today. So let's maybe remember him for that.
I wonder how many people actually... Sorry, Mark, I wonder how many people actually played this album last year when the event did happen.
Oh, which one? World Peace is None of Your Business?
Or the title of the album we're talking about.
Oh, that event. I thought we were talking Ukraine or something. Or, Yemen or any number of places, right?
Exactly.
Where world peace is not on the agenda. But yeah, of course. And one of my other podcasts, as you know, is Texting, which I co-host with Russia-based writer Tomek. But yeah, we did an episode on God Save the Queen, which, as a classic punk track, we have to, if The Queen is Dead is also a punk or post-punk album, it's clearly playing on the Sex Pistols God Save the Queen, maybe giving a more nuanced approach to the monarchy and British life and so on, and Thatcherism and whatever else. But I was just going to ask, like, you know, this is an album that many people have discussed many times. Have we added anything new, like having discussed it for an hour and a half? What have we contributed to the conversation, particularly from the approach of songwriting, musicianship, and production? And, you know, that could include like packaging, like the cover art and so on. What has this podcast contributed to the discussion that listeners can take away, especially songwriters and musicians, or any artist? That's a big question.
It's a big one and a long one. So it's usually me that does this, Mark. You know, you put me on the spot. But I think what we've really done is two or threefold. So what it means to us personally. There's a lot of reflection that I had as I was listening to the album, specifically at that time as what would I be, 16 at that time? Yeah, I would be 16. And where I was and where I was living and what I was doing or not doing, as the case may be. And it brought back a lot of memories that way. From an artistic point of view, it reminded me just how great the Smiths were, or still are. When you listen to albums like The Queen is Dead or Hatfull of Hollow, my two favourites, or then you go listen to Strange Ways, Here We Come, their final album, and then there was a whole bunch of releases after that. I can't remember the names of them now. Rank was a live album. Louder Than Bombs was another album. They released all this material to get out of this record deal they were in with Rough Trade, I think. So there was the way the Smiths ended was a bit messy and all a bit, it was a bit unnecessary from my point of view and a bit disappointing. But I think when we nostalgically look back on just how great they were as a songwriting duo, they're right up there in terms of British contemporary music. As a band, I don't think there are many more iconic bands from the 1980s than the Smiths.
I can't argue with that. I'm thinking of something clever to say in response, but I think you covered it all. I certainly enjoyed going back and listening to this record. I'm glad you suggested it. My favorite Smiths album is Strange Ways, so I'm a bit biased in that sense, but it was really good to go back and listen to The Queen is Dead, and I think I took the deep dive. I think we took the deep dive during our discussion, and I hope that listeners and viewers can take something away from that. I certainly deepened my appreciation for the record, for the band, the rhythm section, and especially for the songwriting duo of Guitar Marr and Pen Morrissey. So that's a good way to close this first episode of Guitar and Pen. I'm Mark Will, your host in Taipei. I was joined today by Craig Branch, who's the host of the Can't Find My Way Home podcast. Anything you want to tell us about that? What's coming up next?
I have an episode, as we record this on the 27th of August, I have an episode coming out tonight with a singer, songwriter, musician, producer based in Berlin, a guy called Greg Clifford. You should go check him out. His work's really great. And I'm also working on an idea for a new podcast as a kind of maybe a once a month kind of idea, but I shall post more about that as the weeks go on.
Okay, where can people find you?
Expat Music Pod, bizarre name. Expat Music Pod on Facebook, Find My Way Home on Instagram, and from there you can follow the link tree. And of course, we are available and where you find all your favourite pods.
Okay, great. Everybody go check that out. And think about what you want to discuss next. What album should we talk about next time? Because we hope that you'll join us again. Take care, everyone.
That's
That's for
me.
you. That's for you. But
After
also,
all that, I'm stumped.
well, you have plenty of time to think
Will
about
do,
it. But,
Mark, absolutely.
but listeners and
Will
viewers,
do.
you can let us know what you'd like to hear us discuss as well. We're open to suggestions.
I want to say thanks for having me, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye, everyone.
Cheers.